This happened in 2013. This kid named Ricky moved in next door to me when he was around 12. For lack of a better term, this kid was pretty much a wuss. I remember one time he fell off his skateboard. He didn't even land hard at all, but he was crying his little heart out in my driveway. He was 16 years old at the time. Fast forward to when the kid was around 18. By then I was selling drugs pretty heavily, and he was one of my best customers. By then he was hanging out with some pretty shady people, which my parents obviously weren't fans of. My parents also didn't know that I was selling drugs, because I was pretty good at keeping it under wraps. Ricky was clearly a follower. He went from a skater/emo type to some kind of wannabe thug, which he just wasn't built for. My parents went to the Outer Banks of North Carolina every year for 2 weeks. They asked if I'd come and stay at their house while they were gone. I was excited, because their house was much better than the crappy little one-bedroom apartment that I had at the time. Everything was going fine at the house. I had my on and off again girlfriend over all the time. There was quite a bit of drugs and alcohol going around. I was far from a saint back then. I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday night. My girl had left a few hours ago. Earlier that day, Ricky had seen me out in front of my parents' house and asked me for a front. I told him no, because I never fronted anyone, and in all honesty, I'd been using a little too much of my own supply, so I couldn't afford it anyway. He didn't like that very much, and we got into an argument. I pretty much punked him in front of all of his friends. By then it was around 2 in the morning. I was obviously nowhere near tired because of all the drugs I had done. I was sitting in the dark watching Netflix in the living room of my parents' house. There was a window to the outside, which I had opened. I paused the TV and was on my phone texting and on Facebook when I heard something. It was the screen of my window slowly sliding open. I know the sound. I had snuck in and out of that house numerous times growing up. I slowly got up and looked out the window. I clearly saw the screen moving, very slowly, up through the curtains. I walked up to the window, and as soon as I looked through the curtains, I saw at least 3 or 4 people scatter. I ran out front, but they were booking it down the street. I knew it was Ricky and his friends. I didn't see them, but I know it was those jerks. I didn't call the police or anything, because I wasn't exactly living on the right side of the law. I just went back in and locked everything up. The rest of the week went smoothly. I never told my parents about it, and I never saw Ricky again. I called him a few times, but he never answered. That was all the more reason to know it was him, and he knew that I knew. About a month went by, and I was watching the news. Ricky was on TV for murder. That blew my mind. He and his 3 friends went out of town, broke into some couple's home, beat them, tied them up, and then stabbed them. Then they burnt the house down after robbing it. They all ended up telling on each other, and Ricky got 35 years after testifying against his co-defendants. It makes me wonder what would have happened to me if I was asleep when they tried to break in. My parents had gone out for the evening, leaving me alone in the house. It was nothing new. I was used to having the place to myself from time to time. My friend Chris was going to come over. We would probably play some video games and just hang out. As I watched the minutes tick by on the clock, anticipation grew within me. Chris was always a good time. He was set to arrive soon, although we never agreed on a firm time. He just said he would come over after dinner. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I jumped up from the couch, assuming it was Chris. I excitedly walked over to the front door. However, when I swung it open, I was greeted by a stranger standing on the porch. Confusion crossed my face as I stared at the unfamiliar man. He was dressed in tattered clothes, and a disheveled beard covered his face. His bloodshot eyes seemed to be searching for something. He started talking to me, just small talk. I was really uncomfortable though. He said that he lived down the street, but I had never seen him before. After a minute or so, I noticed that the man was inching his way into the house. Before I knew it, he was standing in the doorway. He closed the door behind him, and then turned his attention back to me. I caught a whiff of alcohol on his breath. It hung heavy in the air. Something wasn't right. As if sensing my discomfort, the man's demeanor changed. He made his way further into the house, his eyes darting around the room. Panic began to rise within me, but I tried to maintain a calm facade, not wanting to provoke him. "Listen, mister," I stuttered. "I think you should go now. I'm expecting my friend to come over, and I don't want to get in any trouble." Ignoring my plea, the man reached into his pocket. His moves were slow and deliberate. My heart skipped a beat when he pulled out a knife. The room was silent, save for the pounding of my heart, which seemed to echo in my ears. Without a word, the man gestured for me to lead the way to the kitchen. My legs wobbled beneath me as I reluctantly complied. In the kitchen, he instructed me to sit in a chair, his movements still eerily silent. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out of the situation. Thoughts of escape and self-preservation battled within me. I knew that any move I make could have dire consequences. With trembling hands, I sat on one of the kitchen chairs. Minutes felt like hours as the man remained silent, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to steady my breathing, hoping to calm the rising panic within me. And then, as if by some stroke of fate, the sound of sirens hit my ears. They continued to grow louder. I was pretty sure they were coming from me. Police rarely come to my neighborhood. The police burst into the house, and I felt tremendous relief. The intruder's eyes widened with surprise. His grip on the knife loosened for a fraction of a second. It was the opening the police needed. They swiftly moved in and disarmed the man. He was arrested and taken away. My parents came home as soon as they heard. I later found out that Chris saw the man enter my house from across the street. He was only seconds away. When he saw that, he went home and told his parents. They called the police, who saved me. I don't even want to think of what would have happened if Chris was just a few minutes earlier or later. Maybe we both would have been screwed, or maybe one of us would have had the sense to look out before opening the door. The following happened when I was 14 years old. My parents had gone out for the weekend. I'm 17 years old now, so it was a few years ago. I couldn't wait to have the house to myself. My parents weren't bad or anything, but I was looking forward to having some time to myself. Little did I know that this weekend would turn out to be one of the scariest experiences of my life. It was Friday afternoon, and my parents had left for their trip while I was at school. As soon as I got home, I ran upstairs to my room and turned on my Xbox. I was talking to some of my friends in the game. I didn't know any of them in real life. We just got together online to play. I ordered pizza and settled in for a night of gaming. At around midnight, I was still playing, and I heard a strange noise outside. It was a rustling in the bushes or trees. I dismissed it as the wind and went back to my game, but the noise persisted and it was getting louder. I paused the game and listened carefully. I looked out my second-story window and saw a shadow moving around at the side of the house. It looked like the outline of a man. He was in our yard. There was a fence and a gate around our yard, so it was not normal for a stranger to be out there. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang at the front door. I had never been so scared in my life. I slowly crept down the stairs to the front window and peered out. I couldn't see anything, but I heard more noises coming from outside. I didn't know what to do. I was alone, and someone was trying to break into my house. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't want to waste their time if it was nothing. The noises stopped for a while, and I started to calm down a little. But then I heard footsteps coming from outside again. I opened the front door and looked around, but I couldn't see anything. I walked around outside for a minute or two, and then I went back into the house. I was slightly more relaxed after that. I walked up the stairs, looking forward to playing a few more games before bed. After I put on my headset, I thought I heard a noise from my parents' room. Maybe I was just paranoid from before, but I decided to check anyway. I peeked around the corner into my parents' bedroom, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing in the darkness. My body was shaking, and I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, but I was too afraid to make any noise. I backed away slowly, trying to get out of that room without being noticed. Suddenly, the man turned around and looked straight at me. I froze. My eyes locked with his. He was about average height, and he wore a large winter jacket and blue jeans. He started coming towards me, and I turned to run. I ran down the stairs and out the front door. I didn't stop until I was a few blocks away. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived, and we went back to the house. They searched the place and found the intruder. He was still in my parents' room. They took the man out, and they put him in the back of a police car. He looked straight at the ground the whole way there. The police stayed with me for the rest of the night. My parents came back as soon as they could, the next day. They were shocked when they heard what happened. We spent the day cleaning up and repairing the damage that the intruder had caused. I couldn't sleep at night for a while, and every little noise made me afraid. I was scared to be alone, and it took me a long time to feel safe again. To this day, I don't know why he broke into our house that night. It could have been some random burglar, or someone who had been watching our house for a while. All I know is that I never want to experience anything like that again. It's a memory that will stay with me for a very long time. I was home alone one night when I was 15 years old. It was a typical evening, and I was in my room watching YouTube videos on my laptop. The glow of the screen lit up my face as I zoned out watching. Suddenly, I could hear faint footsteps downstairs. Nobody was expected home for hours, so I was worried. I paused the video and strained my ears to listen, hoping that it was just my imagination. But there it was again, a distinct sound, like somebody pacing around back and forth. My mind raced and imagined all sorts of scenarios. I feared the worst. There had been some break-ins in the area, and I was feeling paranoid. I was scared, but too curious not to check it out. I tiptoed out of my room. The creaking floor beneath my feet made me cringe. I slowly descended the stairs, my hands gripping the banister for support. The house seemed unusually quiet, and the footsteps had stopped. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I peeked around the corner, and my eyes bewildered in shock. There in the dimly lit living room stood a man dressed in shabby clothes, seemingly unaware of my presence. He was walking again, just pacing aimlessly, it seemed. I wanted to leave the house, but I didn't think I could make it past the man to get to the door. I know it's the dumbest thing in every horror movie, but I went up the stairs. I had left my phone up there, and I figured I could use it to call for help once I got it. When I was back in my room, I grabbed my phone and opened my closet door. Then I went in and closed it behind me. With trembling hands, I fumbled with my phone and dialed 911. My voice quivered as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. She assured me that help was on the way and instructed me to stay hidden until the police arrived. Time seemed to slow down as I waited in that cramped closet. My mind raced with thoughts of what could happen. The minutes felt like an hour. Finally, I heard banging on the door. It must have been the police. Then I heard the door slam open, and several officers must have entered. Not long later, one of them entered my room. The police informed me that they had arrested the man, but they were unable to determine his motive for breaking into my home. There was no sign of theft and no apparent reason for his intrusion. It remains a mystery to this day. I have no idea what he wanted or what he might have done to me. Lucky for me, I'll never find out.